Welcome back to the channel. My name is Sebastian from Sebastian's Cauldron, as you know already, and I make mistakes sometimes, like we all do, and I sort of realized that the initial format I had planned for the Six of Crows character builds isn't gonna work out. I think that Iron Man one that I did, which you can check out up there, it was really conducive to that longer format. I get a lot of people watching it, a lot of people really enjoying it, but I think for Six of Crows, these characters, it's a lot more simple mapping them to D&D classes, and I don't think they need, individual 10-minute videos where I explain the intricacies of everything, because I think at the end of the day, they're pretty clear on what they can and can't do, and it wouldn't take me very long to, explain what classes, etc., maybe a few extra feats or whatever that I think would be necessary for these characters. Okay, so we are talking about the Six of Crows characters. I already did a video on Kaz Brekker, which you can check out up there. It's a little long, like most of my stuff is. It tends to be quite long, so we're going to try and do this really quickly. There's a few very obvious things that we can get out of the way first and foremost. First of all, everyone's going to be human. There's no need for trying to say that someone's actually a tiefling or an elf. It's no human works. We're just going to leave it at that. If your DM allows you, go variant human, because feats are always good. They're, stupidly overpowered in the 5th edition D&D system. So first of all, Kaz Brekker. He is a rogue mastermind. I've put him as a high intelligence build. Obviously you want to keep your dexterity high and everything. If you want feats, you could take something like observant or keen mind. Expertise in sleight of hand would be absolutely fantastic to help, show his magic tricks and everything. He uses his cane often as a weapon. You could reflavor that as a club or a quarterstaff. I feel like a quarterstaff would have the appropriate length, so you could go with that. Next up, we have Jesper Fahey. Fahey sounds right. I'm gonna say Fahey. Jesper Fahey, he is our resident gunslinger. Now, we have a slight issue because obviously in 5th edition D&D, you can't really use guns rules as written, nor can you dual wield ranged weapons rules as written. I've done a whole series on including firearms in fantasy, which you can check out there. The 3rd video, I believe, is about firearms homebrew, but if you wanted to make a rules as written Jesper, I would just go with a Battlemaster fighter, pump up the charisma because he is a handsome distraction after all, and you could probably just use crossbows. Take the crossbow expert feat, would help alleviate some of the difficulties with loading and everything. Otherwise, if you did want to include firearms, you've got 2 options. You could go with Matt Mercer's Gunslinger, which is generally considered to be one of the better firearm/gunslinger homebrews for 5th edition D&D. Otherwise, the recommendation that I would go with is actually the Weird West update from Mage Hand Press, which is something I talked about in that firearms homebrew video, which I'll put maybe a dedicated link up there. I love doing that, so much fun. But that feels to me like the most congruent with Jesper as a character. He is drawing on Western sort of influences with the revolvers, the spinning tricks, the charisma and everything. And I just feel like the Weird West update has some really interesting homebrew mechanics. It takes a lot from Pathfinder. It does some really interesting things that I feel like balances firearms in a way that make them feel like firearms but doesn't completely break the game. That's probably one of the most difficult things that you have to face when trying to put firearms in the same vein as, crossbows, bows, swords, shields, etc. In terms of feats, Sharpshooter is the absolute essential feat to take. There's nothing else that you could possibly need. You could potentially take Piercer, that's from Tasha's Cauldron from Everything. Tasha's Cauldron of Everything if you wanted, but Sharpshooter is the first thing you should take just in general for any sort of ranged build. It's stupidly overpowered. Some people nerf it. I don't know why you would bother. It's just doing more damage, but that's what I would do for Jesper. Next up, we have Inej Ghafa. She is our resident thief. Sneaky sneak, disappears without a trace. She is clearly going to be a rogue as well. You can either go thief or assassin, depending on which aspect of Inej you want to look at. In the books, we say that she is quite deadly. She is willing to fight. She's not a big fan of killing, but she does it when it's necessary. In the show, we say that she's a little more apprehensive about killing. She does end up killing a couple of people in some very emotionally emotionally charged moments. So it really depends on which aspect of Inej you want to look at. I would probably lean towards Thief just because of the climbing abilities that it gives you, which I feel like are the most important for Inej's character. However, Assassin does have a really powerful combat ability in, you know, getting the drop on someone, so there is also that. There's an argument to be made for going Swashbuckler just in terms of her abilities to sort of duel and fight in those one-on-one scenarios. She's very slippery, can get away from things, so you could potentially go with something like that. But we do know that Inej is a dagger user. She is going to carry a shit ton of daggers. If you want to emphasize the dagger throwing, you could take the Fighting Initiate feat, that's again from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, which gives you a fighting style to take the thrown weapon fighting style, or you could, I don't know, you could maybe dip a level into Fighter to get that. That feels a bit excessive in my opinion. If your DM allows homebrew, you might be able to convince them to give you something like Vax's Blinkback belt from the first Critical Role campaign. I'm pretty sure it's Vex, whichever one's, you know, dagger, dagger, dagger. I can't remember. And that could be really cool, really interesting way to represent her abilities of, you know, just throwing lots of knives. In terms of other feats, you definitely want Mobile just to represent how fast she moves and how unimpeded she is by most obstacles. You could take something like Slasher, but again, Mobile is probably the more important one out of the two. The last three are going to be really quick just because in the show they have little to no screen time and they're quite simplistic or not simplistic, we'll get into it. So Wylan Van Eck, who doesn't appear in the show at all, but he is in the Six Crows books. He is an artificer with the alchemist subclass. This is a subclass that's designed around concocting strange and interesting bombs with different magical effects. That's absolutely Wylan, whether it's constructing just regular bombs, smoke bombs, distracting bombs, sleeping bombs, he's got you covered in that sense. Now for Matthias Helvar, he is a Druskeli, a Fjordan witch hunter. He hunts Grisha down because they are evil, according to his culture. He is pretty clearly a paladin, maybe a warped paladin to some, but in his mind he is a paladin. I am not 100% certain on what oath you would want to go with. I've got in my notes here either Vengeance, Redemption, or Devotion. He is a really complex character with a lot of character progression throughout the books, so it's sort of hard to nail him down as one specific thing. I do think that a paladin does work just in terms of maybe not so much the spells, but the smiting. I think taking the Mage Slayer fate would be really interesting just to represent that sort of Druskeli witch hunter training, the anti-mage sort of abilities. And finally, Nina Zenik, who doesn't fit anywhere. She is a Grisha Heartrender. The Grisha are weird because they are sorcerers in the sense that their magic is innate, but they then have this strange sort of, they're manipulating nature in the sense that a druid would, but druids are so baked into that natural sort of aspect, and none of the druid circles really represent what a Grisha can do. Cleric doesn't make sense because they're not in service to a god. Warlock doesn't make sense either because they're not in service to a patron. They haven't, like, you know, made a sort of transaction to get their power. What I've written down in my notes is Life Cleric, which is not quite right, but I don't think you're gonna find something that's gonna be exactly like what Nina is able to do. So Life Cleric is what I've decided. And you could even later down the line, if you wanted, book readers will know what I'm talking about, if you wanted to change to the Death or Grave domain, that would be well within your rights, I think, just in terms of the character progression, but otherwise, Nina's really difficult. Having the ability to, you know, slow someone's heart rate down and everything is really cool and really interesting, but it's not something that's really explored in something like D&D. So those are the classes, those are the builds. They're really quick, real dirty. Some of them are much easier to do than others. If you have a solution for Nina, holy shit, put it down in the comments because I've got nothing. Doing a Grisha class could be really interesting. I wonder if anyone's done any homebrew like that. I should probably look that up. If you know of any good Grisha homebrew, drop it down in the comments as well. If you have any solutions, any ideas of how you would make these characters, also feel free to put them in the comments. Some people had some really great solutions for Iron Man. You can check that video out up there. I'm not sure if I've already referred to that. If I have, I might just cut that, or I'll leave it in, and people can laugh at me for being an idiot. But otherwise, that's the video. Go check out the show. It's on Netflix or, you know, wherever else you want to find it. It's really cool. Otherwise, the books, I think I've got them just there. They are fantastic, really great read. I wouldn't recommend reading the actual Shadow and Bone trilogy. It's pretty bad. I think the author has even admitted that. The show is a significant improvement. I don't want to slap Mal in the face now, so, you know, that's just me though. That's the video. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I'll see you guys some other time.